name is Norm Volsky, your host, and this is the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast.
Thanks, Norm. It's an honor to be here, and it's been fun to work with you over the years.
Hello, and welcome to the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast with your host, Norm Volsky. And today we are very excited to be jumping into the world of healthcare investing. And there's no one better to do it with than Bill Georges, partner on AlleyCorp's healthcare team. Bill, welcome to the Digital Health Heavyweights podcast.
Thanks for having me, Norm. Excited to be here.
My pleasure. Great to have you. Bill leads investments and incubations related to the payer ecosystem. As a former payer executive, Bill also leverages his domain experience and network to help AlleyCorp healthcare founders go to market. Bill is a board member at Siftwell Analytics and Lilac Software. Previously to AlleyCorp, Bill was a SVP and Chief Strategy Officer at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Jersey, where he led the company's corporate strategy, expanding its business development and leading strategic initiatives group. He also managed the company's venture fund investments. And prior to Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Jersey, Horizon, he spent 15 years at Horizon Blue Cross as SVP and senior analyst, also at JB Morgan Securities. Bill holds a bachelor's degree, magna cum laude, in economics from Brown University, a JD from Villanova, and has his MBA from the Wharton School at UPenn. So very excited to have Bill on the podcast, and we're excited to dive into your career. So what inspired you to build your career in healthcare?
Norm, I wish I had some magical, inspirational story to tell you there. The immediate driver was I was looking for a job coming out of business school, to be totally honest. And if I could go back, I would do the healthcare program at Wharton, but I didn't. I wanted to be a private equity investor. I was in business school during the .com, and the .com bust happened while I was in business school. So coming out of business school, a very good friend of mine said there is a position as a managed care analyst at UBS. And true story, I said, "What's managed care?" And I thought it would be good experience, a bulge bracket investment bank in New York. So I took the job. The learning curve was vertical, but very immediately it did flip over to a passion of mine. And I realized many things about healthcare. It is a story with many, many chapters left to be told. And I just got absorbed into the story. I thought it would be sleepy. The very first thing that happened is President Bush passed the Medicare Modernization Act, and we were off to the races. So
I'm scared to ask, which Bush, HW or W?
Bush 2.
All right, just making sure.
Yes. Yeah, this was in, 2003. So I'm coming up on, 20 plus years in healthcare.
Love that. That's great. So tell us, about AlleyCorp and what inspired you to join.
So I was introduced to AlleyCorp by one of my colleagues who had just left another early stage venture fund and joined AlleyCorp. And she and I had a relationship when I was at Horizon. I ran the innovation efforts at Horizon Blue Cross. I ran our corporate venture capital book there. And she goes to AlleyCorp and she said, "Bill, I'm at an exciting new place where we are building." And that was intriguing to me. And I said, "Well, what's AlleyCorp?" I had never heard of AlleyCorp, honestly. And a couple meetings with her and some other team members, and then ultimately the company's founder, Kevin Ryan. And I was just absolutely absorbed and attracted to the people and the energy and the model.
Great. Tell us a little bit more about what makes AlleyCorp really unique.
So on the one hand, you could describe AlleyCorp as an early stage venture fund. And there is an aspect of what we do that is venture studio / incubation. But I really like to describe AlleyCorp as an operating company
Hmm.
where the operations of which are early stage investing and company building. And I think that makes us unique in the marketplace.
What is the mission of AlleyCorp, and can you tell us about the incredible impact AlleyCorp has had on the healthcare landscape?
Yeah, so AlleyCorp is innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors looking to make impact. We are invested in 4 verticals. Let me spend just a second about healthcare
Hmm.
on healthcare. So within healthcare, it's my personal view that healthcare is just broken,
Yeah.
which is tremendous for people like my colleagues at AlleyCorp, because it's our passion to fix things and
Hmm.
to make things better for the ecosystem, for individuals, members, patients, doctors, and for employers and brokers. It's a very complicated ecosystem. But I think anybody you talk to would acknowledge that the system is suboptimal. Um, we also invest in general technology, robotics, and social impact.
Hmm.
And really, AlleyCorp is a group of super motivated, super smart, but more than that, passionate about bringing change to the ecosystems in which we play.
Hmm.
And that's our DNA.
That's great. In the early years, you worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Jersey. Can you walk us through that experience and how it's helped make you a more informed investor, now
Yeah.
at this
Oh,
stage of your career?
without a doubt. My experience there is the foundation for, to the extent that I am useful as an investor and an advisor.
Hmm.
It nearly all comes from my time at Horizon. So, I was there a long time. I was hired to take the company public in 2008. It was
Hmm.
the last Blue Cross plan to consider going public, following a wave of IPOs, all of which are currently Elevance.
Hmm.
Elevance is a roll up of 14 individual, I think now 15 individual Blue Cross plans, some of which went public, some of which just converted. Horizon was on the path to do that. We tried doing that for a few years. A bunch of regulatory barriers got in the way. Then I undertook a series of operational roles. And that's where I really learned how these things are run from the
Hmm.
belly of the beast, the complexities of it, the necessity to work across different expertise within the organization and really develop alignment. Understanding those operational complexities is the foundation for me personally and my ability to decide if it's a good investment or not. Or if a team has a good approach that is trying to sell to a health plan and helping them navigate those complexities. Literally, the language, who you talk to, and what you need to say to
Yeah.
convince them of your value prop. That was the experience.
Yeah, I think, the best investors in digital health that I know truly understand how health plans think, how they buy, how to play nice with them, how to sell through them, those types of things. And I'm sure your experience really helped you learn and understand all of that. What were some of your greatest challenges at Horizon?
Institutional inertia.
Hmm.
I think it's just that simple. I mean, we were in a position. The analogy that we always used is anytime we tried to innovate, we were trying to change the engines on the airplane at 37,000 feet.
Hmm.
Um, and there were embedded interests that you had to convince to bring along to the next evolution of whatever technology it was or whatever go-to-market strategy we were employing. But I think it captured an institutional inertia. A close second was, as a private nonprofit, we were capital constrained.
Hmm.
And so we were looking for innovative ways to free capital so that we could invest more freely. And over time, we ultimately succeeded in a significant transformation that let us free up capital.
Uh-huh.
I mentioned we tried to do an IPO, we weren't able to. Many, many years later, we mutualized the company,
Hmm.
and that got us some freedom. Capital constraint is the second thing that I would identify.
And what were some of the greatest successes you're most proud of over there?
Let me talk about 2. One of them was navigating the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, which we commonly call Obamacare.
Yep.
I don't think you can underclub this. And let me use another analogy. Obamacare came in, and if Obamacare were legislation directed at the auto industry, it would have been like requiring General Motors to build a 3-wheeled pickup truck made out of plastic and to do it this year. Now, think about that. Think about the complexity. That's a little bit more concrete. I think people understand how changing assembly lines and suppliers and distribution and literally the physics of a 3-wheeled pickup truck. That was the level of intensity that the Affordable Care Act imposed on the managed care industry. The depth of product development, system reconfiguration, go-to-market strategy, and financial engineering that was involved to be successful in doing that. And the time frame with which we were given to do that was, let me be as diplomatic as possible, difficult. And I will tell you, among the Blues and certainly at Horizon, we 100% believed in the policy objective of Obamacare. I want to be clear about that. There was no political resistance to it. It was just a practical matter. I mean, we would have preferred 4 years instead of 1 year to implement. In any event, we did so successfully. And I was running product at the time. I was just surrounded by capable people. I had very little to do with that success. I tried my best to guide at a macro level and just surrounded by some of the best technicians and product development experts in the company. You might know the history, nearly every plan in the country lost tons of money in the first year of Obamacare. Horizon was one of, I think, only 3 plans nationally that made money in the first year of Obamacare.
Wow, that's impressive.
A bit of a long story, but a major point of pride. Very quickly, let me touch on the second one. Under the leadership of the chief strategy officer at the time, my friend and colleague who has left and started a company, I started and launched our corporate venture capital effort. And that was essentially our innovation effort and our strategic investment effort. And I'm really proud of what we built there. We invested in 12 companies, tremendous return, a little bit over 29% IRR, a little over 6.5 times return on invested capital. And we did that over a 7-year period. And it was the foundation for the next career move that I made. So
that's great. Well, you mentioned something that I think really strikes a chord for me. You mentioned, hey, this was a huge success, but I had very little to do with it. It was really the other team members. I know I'm biased, but I think the most important thing a leader can do, and the thing that's going to determine their success and thus their company's success, is recruiting and acquiring great talent and great people. If you can't do that, you can't do anything of substance by yourself. So, I think you had a lot to do with the success because you were able to surround yourself with really capable people. So you didn't have to do it all alone. And I think that's, what great leaders do. So, I think you had very little to do with it and a lot to do with it all at the same time.
Well, I couldn't agree more. A leader's job is to lead and provide guidance and motivation and support and making sure that his or her team has the foundation to be successful. And I said this all the time to them directly. We hired a head of marketing out of a pharma company. We had on board a head of product who was already spectacular. And I always said to each of them, you guys are going to know way more about this. Tell me what support I can give you. And the support that I gave was I tried to tie the macro direction that came out of the CEO's office to the day-to-day tactical execution that they were charged with delivering. And I think if I did add any value, it was the connection between that macro guidance and the tactical delivery that they needed to bring to the table.
Yeah, I'll tell a personal story that's very recent. I got an email from a lot of my partners yesterday congratulating my team for doing, really good numbers wise on this digital health team for May. And the joke was, Norm, you had a baby in the beginning of May. You weren't even here for it. You were on paternity leave, and your, team and you guys did great, and, numbers look awesome. And, I said, well, there's two things to consider. Number one, less important, but, important to consider. A lot of today's production is years and months ago, that just happened to come to fruition now. But the more important piece is our team's great. So even though I was on paternity leave, just a piece of the team, and the rest of the team stepped up and did great. And, most of it is their hard work. So I think even ourselves, we've been able to recruit great people to come work for us. And our team is just full of A players. So even if one of us is missing, we can still do great work. So walk us through a little bit more. You mentioned there are 12 companies, the returns were great. Can you give us a little insight into which of those companies kind of led those returns and which companies you worked with that really were great success stories?
Yeah. So we had 3 major hits. One was Able To.
And 3 out of 12 for all of the people watching and listening that don't really follow venture capital, you're hoping to hit 10%. To hit 25% is in the top tier. So just want to give context, but please talk to me more about Able To.
Norm, 1 second on that, if I could tell a little anecdote. So when we initially created this function and took it to the board of directors and had the board green light this, because we were going to be allocating capital in a new and arguably highly risky way. So we wanted the board to understand and give their blessing. I said what you just said, and I got immediately overridden by the head of the finance committee, who said, you have an unfair advantage as a corporate and a strategic investor. He said, I want to see 25%. And of course, it was the board, and I was very respectful and said, thank you for that guidance, and we'll see what we can do. And of course, I walked out of the room and I was like, wow, okay. We've never even done this before, and we've already got a 3 or a 4x expectation. But, I couldn't disagree. I'm going to use the word cheat. It's not really cheating, but you do have an unfair advantage as a corporate to the extent that you can bring your colleagues on board. So, our head of behavioral health at Horizon is a national luminary in the field. If she said this is a good company, I literally needed to do no due diligence. I would do financial due diligence, but I didn't need to do operational due diligence. I took her word for it. And then the next thing is that she would sign an operating contract and hopefully would grow that operating contract. And then so you immediately created an unbelievable feedback loop in terms of revenue growth and value accretion. And so that is the unfair advantage that a corporate has versus a financial investor like I am now sitting on the outside. So Able To was a telephonic behavioral health play. We had a great exit there. That was a tick under 5x, if I remember. We pulled our money in less than a year in a company called ESRX, which was completely out of the box for us. That was a drug discovery company, but one that worked with health plans to identify gaps in their formulary and build according to what a health plan needed. And because double in less than a year, the IRR on that was through the roof. So that was very exciting.
That's great.
And our biggest success was a company called Safari, which many people might know. We had, I want to say that was a 7X over a relatively short period in time. Again, I want to say there was 160% IRR on that. That company was lifted out of the ashes of an Obamacare co-op, many of which failed, but some of them had technology. And the founder of that company realized that he had one heck of an asset. So he lifted it out, got funding, and then we were the first health plan that he sold to after pulling it out of that failed co-op. And then we were the first of many large health plan clients. And that was a back office consumer benefit platform for lack. It was much more than that, but I'm trying to keep the description brief. Those were our 3 big hits. Out of the 12, I left, so I've lost a little bit of touch, but I would say we only had 1 flatliner. And then the rest of them were, doing okay, still TBD, no liquidity events.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were marked up materially and others were marked up not that materially. As a corporate, the mark didn't really matter because we were very conservative. We didn't let that mark roll into the consolidated financials of the corporate.
Well, it was wildly successful, which is awesome.
I had the best job in the company. I always bragged about that. And I think sometimes that made some of my colleagues a little upset that I said that. But I was like, help me out.
Yeah.
And you'll feel the excitement that we feel on the investing side.
That's great. And, you mentioned, hey, we were kind of cheating because you already have the best experts to evaluate the deals. And oh, by the way, you can, be a strategic customer to those companies and, just be able to raise, revenue that way, which is great. But that's like what VCs do. Like the VCs, their ideal situation is they stack the deck in their favor. They have a lot of de-risking involved. So, it's definitely important to be able to really stack the deck in your favor and be able to minimize risk and de-risk any investment you make, regardless of if you're, a corporate or a boutique or anything in between. Walk us through, as someone who sat on boards a lot of healthcare companies, can you share any behind the scenes glimpses into strategic discussions that shape those orgs, perhaps, in the earlier years?
Yeah, some of the most striking things that I noticed were the necessity to be nimble.
Mm-hmm.
I think many of these companies go in with a very clear view of what they want to do. So the ability to be nimble, I hate to use, trite overused terms, but I will, to fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
You have to try stuff, fail, learn, have a very, very exquisitely sensitive feedback loop. What's working, what's not working. The other thing that was, kind of new to me, CEOs, I think it's the rare CEO that is the inventor as well as the public company leader and everything in between. What I learned and candidly did not know as I began the corporate venture effort is that can actually be a really narrow bandwidth. So one of the companies that I worked with went through 3 CEOs in about a 4-year period. And for me, that was really head snapping. What do you mean? You're getting rid of the guy that invented this company? Oh, yeah, well, he's not the go-to-market guy now that we have 4 customers. And that next person wasn't the person to lead them through a growth phase, a C and a D round.
Mm-hmm.
That was really shocking to me. But now, honestly, I fully understand that. And I'm actually, with very sensitive signal monitoring, looking for that myself now for, our portfolio.
Any unique founder stories that stick out, from your vast experience that you remember, that you think about when you're looking at new investments?
We have a portfolio company right now where the founder turned me on to a new end market. Now, keep in mind, I've been doing this for almost 25 years. And this founder came to me, and internally, we coined a new term. Everyone talks about product market fit. This founder is founder market fit. And I don't want to get into too many of the details because I want to sort of respect this company's trajectory right now.
Yep.
But this founder turned me on to an end market, and their DNA is the DNA of the end market. But let me give you an analogy that is in an adjacency. So brokers in the health insurance business, they have a different DNA from everybody else in the healthcare business. Completely different. They talk differently. They use different words. Their selling process is different. So imagine if you had a former broker come to you and found a company.
Yeah.
And he's using words and language. You literally dress differently, Norm. And I know that sounds funny, but this is exactly what I experienced with this other person in the non-broker context. So that's one of my favorite founder stories. This person turned me on to an end market, and he himself, it was the DNA of that end market. And that had a lot to do with our confidence to pull the trigger and invest in that company.
Yeah, I think when a founder is a subject matter expert, when they're seen as an authority in the market they're selling into, and they know how to speak to the end buyer and what they care about and what their incentives are, huge advantage compared to someone just like, oh, there's a good idea, let me go after it without like knowing much about the industry, which is great. Any other investments that you're particularly excited about?
In our current portfolio?
I assume those are the ones you want to talk about.
Yeah,
Not ones you're
let me talk
considering.
about
You don't want to
let me
lose any
talk about
leverage.
two that are at sort of different ends in the spectrum, right? So one of our incubations, which is now a very mature company, Pearl Health. So it's a physician risk enablement platform. I love this company. It speaks to an area of passion for me, which is that I firmly believe that value-based care isn't working.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I don't believe in it, but I'm highlighting the fact that the supportive ecosystem to build successful value-based companies is in its infancy. And Pearl is a major tool to enable that. It is literally a tool that is in the hands of physicians at the point of care delivery that guides them through the value-based protocol that they need to achieve the value-based metrics that either the government or the private sector payer expects those physicians to deliver. Incredibly excited about that. That's an AlleyCorp incubation. I think it's a little over 2 years old at this point. It predates me, but I've been acting as an advisor, helping them navigate the payer landscape. Initially, they went direct to physicians, but they have a
And that's what
massive
you're
value
talking about, like
proposition.
being able to pivot. Like the founders had one idea over time. Hey, maybe this isn't the right market or the most efficient market to sell into. And like being able to make that pivot and, being agile probably improved the trajectory of the company and the valuation.
Absolutely. Selling to physicians, I'm going to use the word retail to juxtapose it as the selling to health plans, which is wholesale.
Yeah.
So you have to sell to a lot of physician groups to garner meaningful membership. Well, if you sell to one national MA plan, I mean, you're talking millions of
You're
members.
getting
And
scale.
so that pivot has been meaningful for them. The other one I want to talk about also in this idea of, value-based care not working is a seed stage company, pre-product, pre-customer, Lilac Software. We just made the seed investment. I'm on the board of Lilac. When we met the founder, she put up a slide that was something that I'd seen 100 times before. It was the IT infrastructure that I saw at Horizon. And I jokingly said to her, you stole that from one of our Horizon strategy meetings. And she said, no. She goes, all managed care companies have this infrastructure. And I immediately challenged her and I said, well, I've always been told that you can't fix it because it's too complicated and every point is the bottleneck. And if you break any one of these bottlenecks, you're in for a world of hurt. But I never accepted that explanation, even though I'm an economist by training. I always sort of smelled something there. There was something that the leader of a large organization, a risk that he or she didn't want to tackle. And I said to her, tell me that you can fix this because I know I'm going to find somebody who can fix this. True story, Norm. She turns the page and it details how she's going to go through this complex computer flow chart one piece at a time and fix it, and thereby rebuild the infrastructure of a payer to enable value-based care. And I don't know about my colleagues. The rest of my colleagues were in the room, but at that moment, I was sold that she was onto something differentiated.
I love that. You know a ton about payers. You've worked in this industry for a couple decades plus. What's something you just don't understand about the payer ecosystem? Like something that just doesn't compute. You mentioned, I don't think value-based care is working. I think there's a way to fix it, but we still aren't there yet. What do you think is just completely flawed in the payer world?
I'm going to say the resistance and reticence to change. We have to find a pathway to bring innovation into these larger organizations. And it's not just payers. Okay.
Mhm.
It's the delivery ecosystem. It's the large hospital systems. I think I could spend a lot of time in a very academic way explaining to you the different barriers to this. And, maybe that's a podcast for another time because,
Mhm.
I spent 15 years pondering it while I was at Horizon.
Yeah.
So I think I understand it, but without getting into the causal factors and therefore the solutions, that's going to be my answer to your question. We have to drop look at every leadership roundtable, and we had them weekly when I was at Horizon, and at many board meetings even. We would always look around and say, look, we know this is a problem. We know that we need to do this different. We know that we need, and I would always think, well, you own that, or I own that, or this colleague over here owns that. So why don't we begin the process of changing it? And so that was always just a head scratcher. So
Interesting. So you've forgotten more about health plans since we started talking than I know in my entire life. So, like, just throwing that out there. But my rudimentary answer at the core level of why payers are so resistant to change is in my business, I'm in human capital. Like, I am in the people business. So I spend a lot of my time and energy in the last 12, 13 plus years in this business studying behaviors and people and how they react. And what I've learned is humans respond to incentives. And when we're talking about executives in large health plans or like the benefits leader within an employer, they're not incentivized to change. When the decision is, okay, if I get this right, I get a pat on the back. If I get this wrong, I get fired. There's not enough balance there. There's not enough incentive to take risks.
yeah,
So until employers or until health plans reward people financially for taking risk when the decisions go well, what's the true incentive to really do things a whole lot differently? I think that's like, we got to fix that.
yeah,
Until people are rewarded for taking risk and saving a ton of money or improving clinical outcomes or whatever it is,
yeah.
people are always going to just kind of go with the safe option.
You went straight to the root cause. That is the root cause. Let's look at the difference in performance between the publicly traded managed care companies and the layers of private managed care companies. Okay. The biggest of which, of course, are Blues. But
Mhm.
let's remember there's 300 payers, ballpark number, across the country. Only at this point, what, 5 or 10? I should know the exact number. I mean, back in my analyst day, there were 15, but
Mhm.
mergers have brought us to less than 10. There are 300. The nonprofit layer adds this layer of incentive complexity that you have just identified. Closely related to that is the fact that many of these plans, Blues in particular, are overwhelming market share leaders. So when you're 50, 60, or 70% of the market, you hit it on the nail. Why would you change that? Why would you change that? Because throwing change into that equation, it's much more likely that you diminish the market share concentration by getting something wrong. And you're not incentivized the way the publicly traded companies are incentivized. There is no shareholder oversight of the board, and therefore intense board oversight of management. And the way the publicly traded system works is the shareholders impose upon the board an expectation of optimization across a set of metrics. And let's just say that that's margin. Okay. Well, that doesn't exist in the private sector.
Mhm.
There are, to be fair, there's different missions. There's, maybe you can get into politics here. Maybe you should say perhaps healthcare shouldn't have a profit motive. Okay, we can talk about that. That's
Yeah.
arguable, but innovation is not incentivized. That is for sure. And where it is relatively more incentivized, it is relatively more present.
Yeah. Like, I will scream from the mountaintops. Why would a benefits manager, if they implement a solution and it helps their company save $30 million, $50 million, $100 million, why shouldn't they get a small piece of that? if you're not going to, like, why would someone in that position take risks when the best they can get is a pat on the back? The worst case scenario is getting fired. Like, it's just not incentivizing people to take worthwhile, smart risks to really drive down cost, improve clinical quality. I think it's the big gap in decision making in our space. What are 5 crucial traits you look for, in a founder? I think there's a lot of founders that have very different phenotypes, but a lot of them have similarities that are successful. What are the things you look for?
So I'll share a concept with you that I want to say the word is new to me in the last year and a half after joining AlleyCorp, and we call it followership. And this is the concept that you can get a team of talented people to follow you into the breach. We know the risks associated and the sacrifices associated with a startup. You have people that on a cash basis could probably make anywhere from 5 to 10x what they might get paid at a startup. And, the probability of success is limited. So that golden stock option payoff at the end that would help equalize the risks that you take is a true risk. So you need a leader that can engender confidence, optimism, a willingness to continue to listen and learn and reinvent. And I think all of those are characteristics of followership. There's also, I would say, I think there's an aspect of charisma in the concept of followership. But I don't want to over-rotate on charisma because I don't want to be saying just that you need to be sort of interesting and energetic. Because I know a lot of not so interesting, not so energetic leaders, that there are other elements of what they bring to the table where people say, I want to hitch my future to this leader.
They have a magnetism. It's not about like outgoing personality or not. It's just like,
That's right.
Do people gravitate towards them because of their insights, their knowledge, whatever it may be?
Yeah. And there has to be a certain confidence that you have in that person.
Excellent. How does AlleyCorp source deals?
The most important thing is network. One of the things that we are doing is we are evolving our metrics and our measurement now as this becomes a more formal organization. On the back of closing our fund. We closed the fund and announced it probably about a month ago at this point now.
Congrats.
But the reason I say that is because I am not aware if we track and have statistics on this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say north of 90, probably 95% of every deal that we get. Deals that we source. Let's come back to incubation in a second because that is a different model. Deals that we source is network. And 2 aspects to that network, I would say. The first thing is just critically being plugged into people across the ecosystem who are keeping you aware of market needs, market trends, and market innovations. The other key piece to that, and they may be the same people, but sometimes they're not, is being plugged into people that are hearing about entrepreneurs that are building companies that match up to those market needs.
Yeah. How do you help founders go to market?
We're partners every step of the way to the extent that those founders want us there. I'm going to give credit to a founder of a venture fund that I worked with when I was at Horizon for this phrase. So if he hears this, he knows that he said it, and I will not claim originality. But the phrase is help, don't hinder. And so what I tell people is, you have my phone number 24 hours a day. I mean, hopefully it's not a 4 a.m. call because that's probably bad news. But if it needs to be, pick up the phone. And at AlleyCorp, we have an ecosystem that can help on literally every dimension, right? Like, let's go back to the Silicon Valley collapse. And for at least, 48 or 72 hours, we were extremely concerned about a bank run and liquidity issues for companies. One of our companies had just raised $50 million and it was on deposit at SVB. We immediately worked our network and went to other banks that fund startups, moved money, secured liquidity, lines of credit, and so forth, just as an example.
That's great. How do you personally evaluate deals? You mentioned like you have great network, you can bounce it off experts depending on what the company's doing. Like anything else that's kind of unique?
We've touched on this already. If there's 10 things you're looking at, the first 9 is the team. And then the 10th thing is kind of everything else, right? You want product market fit. The sooner you could develop customer traction, the better. That is of particular significance in my subset because selling to payers is extremely complicated. My off-the-cuff advice is you have an 18-month sales cycle.
Yeah.
Some people can short-circuit that. That is of great interest and incredibly valuable to me if you can short-circuit that. And there are characteristics of companies and products that can short-circuit that. So that's another thing that is interesting. Capital efficiency and knowing who you're talking to. I'm still shocked at the occasional lack of sensitivity around who you're talking to. A couple years ago, this was intensely focused around not understanding the security requirements. So you would have people come in and they'd sit across from the CISO of a managed care plan, and they wouldn't be ready for that conversation. And frankly, they'd get embarrassed very quickly. You really have to know who you're talking to and what's going to make them look good with their organization if they decide to work with a very risky early stage startup company.
Yep. Very helpful. Any other not so obvious red flags that you're looking for in deals?
I think we hit on a couple of the major ones. I think you need to develop traction in a very short period of time. This goes back to the capital efficiency and understanding how to balance product development with go-to-market. In certain instances, you're talking to payers that need mature product, and you get into an immediate paradox there because you're 2 people in a garage. So you don't have product. You have a really good idea that hopefully solves a problem. So, understanding that and moving very quickly in a capital efficient way could really mean the difference between getting that seed. When we incubate a company, we'll start off with $1 million or $2 million to get them off the ground. Very quickly, they'll move to a seed round. And the thumbs up or thumbs down on that seed round all goes back to that capital efficiency question.
What's the most unexpected challenge you've had in venture in your decade plus of doing this?
Pattern recognition.
Yeah, in what way?
And I've been talking about this. It's funny, for some reason, it's come up a lot. Maybe we all saw the same podcast or talked to the same consultant. So both with my colleagues internally, as well as friends and colleagues at other venture funds, I really am struck by the lack of pattern recognition. So why are you doing this investment? Great product fit. Why are you not doing that investment? Lack of product fit. But wait a second. They both look like they have spectacular product fit to me. Why do you see no product fit here? Right? Founder maturity. Great founder maturity. Let's make that investment. Lack of founder maturity. Wait a second. That founder has 10 more years in the industry than the one that you just made the investment in. So absolute lack of pattern recognition. So in a couple of your preceding questions, we talked about some of the patterns that get us comfortable to pull the trigger, but I could show you just as many exceptions to some of those. And so, yeah, it's that pattern recognition it's a frustrating point for me because I'll see something, I'll take it to the team, I'll have a high degree of confidence that there'll be tremendous excitement around this and we'll move immediately to investment committee, and it gets killed in that first conversation. So
yeah. What advice would you give a founder that's currently looking to raise funds and like going into a pitch? I think this is a very unique environment for founders, and you are one that really focuses on earlier stage investment. So I think your advice could be very valuable to someone looking to go pitch in the next few weeks or months.
So, to the extent possible, be ready to address the hot buttons of an early stage venture capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be that hard to figure out what the top 5 questions are going to be. Be ready for those questions. Okay. We're going to ask you what your founder story is.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to want to know about your go-to-market strategy, about your product development strategy. We're going to want to know, how big do you think this can get, and over what period of time?
Mm-hmm.
Understand that you're talking to a venture investor and not a private equity investor. So, we need 10 and 100x, and you need to be building a business that can be underwritten to that. A
Mm-hmm.
private equity investor is looking for 2 to 3x.
Yep.
Because the scale economics are incredibly different at that. And surprisingly, I've had people not quite understand that, which is a little confounding to me, because just some very basic research ought to get you to that. And, understand the culture of the people that you're talking to when you walk in. The cultural differences between VCs are as different as the cultural differences between founders and businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so do your due diligence and try to find a good match. Now, that requires some conversation. So, you might be learning during that introductory conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are some of the top things that I would recommend to an early stage founder.
That's great. I notice, a lot of people who are influential in this market, they're big on practicing what they preach. We're spending our whole day in healthcare. It's what our professional lives are. But I think that always kind of blends in with your personal life as well. You're in a very stressful job. VCs have high expectations, a lot of responsibility to a lot of people they care about. What are your favorite ways to reduce stress and, exercise?
Good question. So I just getting back on my bike. So I road raced competitively, almost 20 years ago at this point. Moved to New York, got a little too intimate with a couple taxi cabs,
Mm-hmm.
and hung up my wheels for a long time. I'm still in New York all the time, but I spent a lot of time back in the suburbs of Philadelphia where I grew up. So I'm back on the bike, trying to build up the mileage again.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that. And I'll tell you another one that's a little unique and an unbelievable amount of fun. And I'm trying to recruit people all the time. I've been racing cars
Very
for
cool.
fun. I have absolutely no talent, and it takes a lot of nerve. But I spent some time on the racetrack. And I have a bunch of healthcare colleagues that join me on the racetrack. So we go around to different famous racetracks in the country, ones that you've heard of. Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I think everyone heard of that one.
Wow.
So we've been there, and we've been around the track, and it's a blast. And I will tell you, if you think you're just sitting still driving in a car, your heart rate is up in the red zone, and the mental concentration required to do that is a real workout. So those are the 2 things that I spend some of my spare time doing.
That's the first time we've heard that. So I'd love to hear about new ways, to, engage your body in physical activity. Might have to try that one time. So,
Let
Bill,
me know.
thank you so much for
I'll get you
joining
out
us
on the
on the
track.
Digital Health Heavyweights podcast. Great episode. And we look forward to hearing about great investments that AlleyCorp and your team make in the not so distant future. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe below if you enjoyed it.